Hello there, you're watching All24 News World News Program. To the headlines. In Gaza, the Zionist occupation bombs tents and 8 centers as the UN slams its starvation policy. Next up, over 180 killed this year in Gaza. The UN calls it an attack on humanity, while Hamas rejects moves to block aid. Also on news tonight, on National Mujahid or Veteran Day, President Tebboune vows to protect sovereignty and development. And Army General Shingriha stresses unity and national principles. And later on, with summit plans in the air, Zelensky won't go to Moscow. Russia blames Ukraine's allies, and China urges negotiations. All this and more shortly. Welcome back. First off in our news tonight, at least 34 Palestinians, mostly women and children, were killed Tuesday in relentless Zionist airstrikes across central and northern Gaza Strip. Hospitals in Deir al-Balah, Zaytun, Sabra and Jabalia confirmed dozens of victims, including a journalist. And in Khan Yunis, warplanes bombed tents sheltering displaced families in the Al-Mawasi area, killing at least 15 and wounding many more. The strikes have continued since dawn, leaving hospitals overwhelmed and families shattered. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza Strip said Tuesday that 31 people were killed and over 197 injured in just 24 hours alone while waiting for aid. This raises the toll of starvation-related deaths to 1,996, with more than 14,898 wounded since the so-called American Foundation for Gaza Relief began operating. The UN is raising red flags over Gaza Strip. Its Human Rights Office says the Zionist occupation is deliberately blocking aid, letting in only a trickle of supplies in recent weeks, nowhere near enough to stop famine. Spokesperson Tamim Al-Khitan told reporters in Geneva that the starvation in Gaza is no accident but the result of a calculated obstruction of humanitarian aid.
The risk of starvation is everywhere in Gaza. This is a direct result of the Israeli government's policy of blocking humanitarian aid. In the past few weeks, Israeli authorities have only allowed aid to enter in quantities that remain far below what would be required to avert widespread starvation. Reaching the meager supplies available can be a deadly pursuit.
For his part, Mohammed Abu Maghisab, Deputy Medical Coordinator for Doctors Without Borders in Gaza, said Palestinian casualties have doubled since the occupation and the US began running aid distribution centers. In a video posted on MSF's Instagram, he confirmed the centers have tripled the daily influx of wounded, many of whom die before reaching hospitals.
Gaza health system was already a fragile system. What remains is a shell, barely functioning. The flood of patients is unprecedented, and now a new horror. The so-called food distribution points, supported by Israel through the GHF, turned into killing grounds. These sites has tripled the daily influx of wounded. Many die before they reach us. We see amputations, gaping infections, shattered bones and torn arteries, needing emergency surgery and intensive care. But both are collapsing across Gaza.
The UN said Tuesday that 188 workers have been killed in Gaza so far this year, making up half of all humanitarian workers killed worldwide. Jens Lerck, deputy spokesperson for OCHA, warned from Geneva that the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories is rapidly worsening.
The fact that attacks on this scale occur without any accountability is a shameful indictment of international inaction and indifference. As a humanitarian community, we demand once again that those with power and influence act for the sake of humanity, protect civilians and aid workers, and hold perpetrators accountable.
And more from the UN tonight. UNRWA Chief Philip Lazzarini says the agency has lost 360 staff in Gaza, many killed while on duty, with hundreds more injured. He revealed that around 50 employees were arrested or detained, some even tortured, before release. Despite the losses, Lazzarini vowed UNRWA will keep serving Palestine refugees until a just solution is reached and the conflict ends through diplomacy and peace. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also condemned the targeting of humanitarian workers, noting that Gaza records the highest rate of such attacks worldwide. He stressed that striking relief workers is an attack on humanity and reaffirmed that their protection is a binding, non-negotiable duty. Guterres also called for halting arms supplies to parties violating international law and holding them accountable.
Every aid work last year, at least 390 aid workers, a record high, were killed across the world, from Gaza to Sudan to Myanmar and beyond. International law is clear. Humanitarians must be respected and protected. They can never be targeted. This rule is non-negotiable and is binding on all parties to conflict, always and everywhere. Yet, red lines are crossed with impunity. On this World Humanitarian Day, let's honor the fallen with action. To protect every aid worker and invest in their safety. To stop the lies that cost lives. To strengthen accountability and bring perpetrators to justice. To end arms flows to parties that violate international law. Together, let us say in one voice, an attack on humanitarians is an attack on humanity.
The Zionist occupation aggression in Gaza has resulted in the deaths of hundreds of humanitarian aid workers, a devastating toll that has drawn widespread international condemnation. Zahra Farjani has the full story.
They are now just photos and names listed in reports by official and non-official bodies. Relief workers who were killed while carrying out their humanitarian duties in Gaza, deliberately targeted by an occupation forces that recognizes neither international law nor human rights.
These are considered crimes against humanity and war crimes. The international community must intervene to stop and compel Israel to respect international conventions and the rules of international humanitarian law, which prohibit the targeting of providers of health services and ambulances during war and conflict.
Amid the wreckage of destroyed ambulances, a Palestinian paramedic walks through the ruins, recalling the moment he learned that his son and colleague had been killed while on a mission to save innocent lives. Lives cut short without warning by the Zionist occupation.
The news that was most painful is that my friend told me there was a direct target against the man, and there is a possibility that Muhammad was targeted. Muhammad would enter many areas that were bombed, had martyrs, and the Zionists might target him again. Muhammad would enter, evacuate the martyrs, and evacuate the patients.
The occupation's crimes committed against relief workers, long concealed under flimsy justifications, have been exposed through videos captured on the phones of those who died in service. The most recent footage shows the annihilation of an entire team of paramedics and volunteers as they rushed in their vehicles to respond to calls for help at the entrance of Tel Sultan, west of Rafah in southern Gaza. The brutality of the occupation did not stop at bombing or direct execution. It extended to systematically covering up strike sites and concealing the bodies of fallen relief workers, a crime in every sense.
We need justice for the victims, and we need to ensure that all of those who are responsible are held to account. Without this, the crimes will continue to happen. Without this, the systematic targeting for humanitarians, aid workers, and medics will continue to happen.
The deliberate targeting of humanitarian workers in Gaza is not an isolated act of violence. but part of a broader strategy of collective punishment. By silencing those who risk their lives to save others, the Zionist occupation seeks to strip Palestinians of the very lifeline that sustains them under siege.
Qatar says there may be a new opening for a ceasefire in Gaza Strip. The Foreign Ministry confirmed Hamas has accepted a proposal nearly identical to one put forward earlier by U.S. envoy. Mediators are now waiting on the Zionist occupation's response, describing the talks as having a positive atmosphere, though no timeline has been given. The plan calls for immediate aid deliveries into Gaza Strip, followed by a long-term prisoner exchange.
It is within the confines of the Witkoff plan, which you mentioned, and you're absolutely right. It's a continuation of that process. There are elements to the plan. There are elements that would kick off relatively, quickly. Well, we hope that would happen, like aid going in, the redeployment of Israeli forces, and obviously the ceasefire. Right? There are other elements which would take time to implement within a timeline that's been specified in the plan, like the exchange of prisoners and hostages. But the important thing here is that if we get to a deal.
A senior Hamas official stated that the ceasefire proposal it approved does not call for disarmament. Ayman Shanaz stressed that all Palestinian factions see giving up their weapons as a red line and accused the occupation of complicating the talks.
Hamas and the resistance factions have agreed to a compromise involving withdrawals from residential areas up to 800 meters deep and up to around 1,000 meters in border zones. The proposal does not address disarmament that remains a red line for Hamas. The movement and the resistance factions will not leave Gaza, but they are open to an agreement on a temporary administration of the Strip once the war ends.
And elsewhere, Algeria is calling out the Zionist entity at the UN. At a UN Security Council session on women in conflict, diplomat Sarah Deryoush condemned the use of sexual violence against civilians, calling it a weapon of war. She urged the Council to hold perpetrators accountable, warning that justice is vital to restoring international credibility. Deryoush also voiced concern over a UN report that recorded 12 cases of sexual violence in occupied Palestine, and questioned why the Zionist entity was not listed among perpetrators.
The victims of conflict-related sexual violence deserve justice. No one is above the law. Israel's occupying forces violate human dignity daily in Gaza. They weaponize sexual violence against a defenseless civilian population. Algeria urges this council to act with courage, name the perpetrators, hold them accountable, restore the credibility of our mechanisms. The Secretary General's report is alarming regarding the situation in the Palestinian occupied territories. It confirms the United Nations verified 12 incidents of conflict-related sexual violence perpetrated by Israeli armed and security forces. It also documents 2 cases of rape and 4 incidents of violence to the genitals against Palestinian men.
Elsewhere in North Africa, in Algeria more particular, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune marked National Mujahid Day on Tuesday by honoring the martyrs and renewing his pledge to safeguard sovereignty and drive sustainable development. In a message recalling the Constantine attacks and the Sommam Conference, he said the anniversary reinforces Algeria's commitment to the path of liberation built by patriots who defend his trust. Tebboune described Algeria as a proud, strong, and fiercely independent nation.
Our celebration of this double anniversary is an occasion on which we recall the great struggles, immense sacrifices and painful suffering that the people endured with patience and courage during a harsh, brutal war, which they fought believing in victory, in justice and in freedom. It is a moment when we renew our pledge to the martyrs and mujahideen and our loyalty to the immortal message of November in an Algeria built by the will of patriots who are faithful to the trust and who safeguard the legacy, a proud and strong Algeria determined to preserve the independence of its decisions and the integrity of its sovereignty, and on the path to the goals of true sustainable development, which will propel it to the level of a rising nation, full of promise, prosperity and growth.
President Abdelmajid Tebboune also honored the Liberation Revolution, praising its military victories and its successful political campaigns on the world stage.
We celebrate Mujahid Day, and on this 70th anniversary of the attacks in northern Constantine, we recall the honorable battles in which the valiant Liberation Army fought with bravery, demonstrating the ability of the heroic Mujahideen to inflict heavy and painful losses on the colonial army. They were determined to overcome its heavily armed forces by seizing the initiative and imposing both the arena and the timing of the military confrontation on the enemy. This, in turn, amplified the resonance of the November 1st, 1954 revolution, whose bloody chapters were followed closely across the world. Free peoples in every corner of the globe echoed its military victories on the battlefield and its political achievements on international platforms and forums.
Still in Algeria, Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Army Chief of Staff General Said Shingriha marked National Mujahid Day as a time to strengthen unity and uphold the nation's principles. In a message to Army personnel, he urged preserving the Mujahideen's legacy, drawing inspiration from their values and protecting national memory against today's and tomorrow's challenges.
This National Day, which commemorates two pivotal events in the history of our glorious revolution, namely the Northern Constantine offensives and the Sumam Conference, is a treasured memory through which we fulfill our duty of gratitude, loyalty, and respect to the virtuous Mujahideen of Algeria who won independence with iron and fire. They embodied the highest acts of heroism and chivalry for the people and their homeland, raised the nation's flag high, rebuilt the Algerian state and safeguarded its republican character even in the darkest of times. Today we renew our pledge to honor their trust, draw inspiration from their lofty national values, uphold noble positions and principles, strengthen national unity, and preserve the national memory, the pure source from which we derive our strength in facing all present and future challenges.
In a follow-up to the deadly bus crash in Algiers, the court has ordered the detention of 4 people: the bus owner, driver, a technical inspector, and a ticket collector. Prosecutor Rostom Mansouri said the probe found serious violations, including the fact that the bus wasn't licensed to operate. A technical report confirmed the crash was caused by a simultaneous failure of the steering and brake systems. After talks at the White House, reports suggest a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky could happen within 2 weeks. It would pave the way for a 3-way summit with the United States President to lay out terms for a lasting agreement. Yasin Rukti has the report.
2 major summits took place within 4 days, one of them historic, the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. From the moment they stepped off the plane, the warm welcome extended to Vladimir Putin by Donald Trump surprised many and left European leaders deliberately sidelined from this symbolic encounter, visibly frustrated.
Russia emerged from this couple of days energized. Putin has come back home thinking that he has scored a major victory without really paying the price for it. What does this victory amount to? Well, he got the glory and the recognition of being there next to President Trump and showing to the Europeans, which is very important, that he cannot be isolated. The message that is now being beamed to the Russian domestic audiences is, look, they in Europe try to isolate us, they try to shun us, but here we are back on the international stage.
No agreement emerged, yet the summit marked a turning point. Putin moved from the pariah image cultivated by the EU and the previous US administration to that of an honored guest on American soil, treated as a partner and an august world leader.
The Alaska summit reinforced my belief that while difficult, peace is within reach, and I believe that in a very significant step, President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider.
This shift was reinforced 3 days later during Trump's talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the presence of European leaders. In a striking gesture, Trump interrupted the meeting to call Putin and brief him directly, underlining the closeness between Washington and Moscow. Trump also projected optimism about peace, while Zelensky and European leaders focused on U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine, which Zelensky said could be formalized within 2 weeks.
Security guarantees will likely be detailed by our partners, and more details will emerge. All of this will be formalized on paper within a week to 10 days.
There was a real sense of unity between the European leaders that were there and President Trump and President Zelensky. And we had two material outcomes. The first, on the question of security guarantees, was the agreement that the coalition of willing countries, that's 30 countries already working together on security guarantees, will now work with the US on those guarantees, coordinating.
Dignitary, and I liked him from day one.
Once again, Trump proposed a trilateral summit with Putin and Zelensky to finalize a peace agreement. Zelensky welcomed the idea, though the Kremlin has yet to respond. From Alaska to Kyiv, the world has witnessed handshakes, phone calls and bold promises. What remains to be seen is whether these scenes mark the dawn of peace or just another performance on the world stage.
Being here.
Thanks so much, Mr. President.
In a similar news story, Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed hosting a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in Moscow to end the war. AFP reported Tuesday, citing informed sources, that the offer came during a phone call with the United States President Donald Trump after Monday's Washington talks. According to the same sources, the Ukrainian president rejected the proposal. For his part, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow is open to any format to resolve the Ukrainian crisis, bilateral or trilateral. But he stressed that any high-level talks, including between leaders, must be thoroughly prepared and cannot be based on media statements alone.
Moscow does not reject any format for working on the Ukrainian settlement, whether bilateral or trilateral. President Putin has reiterated this several times. The key point is that such meetings should not be held merely for media coverage. Any talks involving national leaders must be prepared with the utmost precision.
Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has accused European leaders of escalating the conflict and prolonging the war by continuing to supply weapons to Ukraine.
It was absolutely clear that the US president and his team genuinely wanted to reach a result that would be lasting, sustainable and credible, unlike the Europeans who are shouting from every corner for a ceasefire while continuing to supply weapons to Ukraine.
Meanwhile, China is once again pushing for peace in Ukraine. After the Washington meeting between Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders, Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said dialogue and negotiation are the only way forward and stressed Beijing's support for all initiatives aimed at ending the crisis.
With the right approach this afternoon.
China's position on the Ukrainian crisis has been consistent and clear. China did not create the Ukraine crisis nor is a party to it. However, upholding an objective and impartial stance, China has been persistently advocating for peace and promoting dialogue since the first day of the crisis. China stands ready to work with the international community to continue playing a constructive role in the political settlement of the crisis in accordance with the will of the parties involved.
And now the news in brief with Salman Asab.
Mali's Supreme Court Investigation Chamber has ordered imprisonment of former Prime Minister Choguel Kalala Maïga on corruption-related charges. Maïga was formally charged following a hearing before the court's investigation chamber. He had been in custody for a week. According to a judicial source cited by AFP, he will face charges of damaging public property, forgery, and use of forged documents. The UN's OSHA reported that around 70 people were killed in Rapid Support Forces attack on Abu Shuk camp near Al-Fashir, North Darfur. The camp, facing famine, lies on the outskirts of the besieged city. Meanwhile, the organization expressed deep concern and renewed calls for safe and unhindered humanitarian access across Sudan. The recent heatwave in Spain has resulted in the death of over 1,100 people, according to estimates by the Carlos III Institute for Public Health Research. The specialized institute, which monitors daily mortality rates in Spain, reported that the 16-day heat waves from August 3rd to August 18 led to a total of 1,149 recorded deaths. The European Union announced that it has returned the draft joint statement on trade and tariffs to the United States after receiving proposals last week from the Trump administration regarding the agreement's wording. For his part, a European Commission spokesperson told Reuters that some final details, such as exemptions for the auto sector, still require executive orders from the White House before full implementation. The Palestinian Ministry of Culture has selected the film Palestine 1936, directed by Anne-Marie Jassir, as Palestine official submission for Best International Feature at the 89th Academy Awards in 2026. The film is a bold historical drama that explores the roots of the ongoing Nakba through the 1936 Palestinian revolt against British rule and the call for independence. Its cast includes Oscar-winning British actor Jeremy Irons and Palestinian actress Hiyam Abbas, along with a team of acclaimed international talent.
And that's the end of our news program for tonight. See you next time.